The night had fallen heavy over the plains. The kind of night that wrapped everything in a strange, uneasy quiet. The wind carried the scent of rain and dust, whispering through the tall grass as if warning that something was about to change. Jacob Hartley, a rugged rancher with years of sun-etched lines across his face and the weight of solitude in his eyes, rode slowly toward the old barn at the far end of his land. The lantern hanging from his saddle cast a soft glow that barely pierced the darkness. But it was enough for him to notice the faintest movement near the barn door. A shadow that didn't belong there. He stopped his horse, hand tightening around the reins. His instincts sharp as the cold night air. The war had taught him to never ignore a flicker in the dark. He dismounted quietly, boots sinking into the wet earth, and walked toward the barn. The air inside was thick with the smell of hay and damp wood. Then he heard it, a soft, trembling sound, almost a whimper. Jacob froze. Slowly, he raised his lantern toward the sound. And what he saw made his breath catch. A young woman sat on the ground. Her body wrapped in a torn blanket. Her hair matted with rain and dirt. Her eyes, wide and glistening with fear, locked onto his. For a long moment, neither spoke. She looked like a ghost that had wandered too far from its grave, frail, trembling, and desperate. Jacob's voice came low, careful. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" She didn't answer. Instead, she clutched the blanket tighter around herself as if afraid he might take it away. The rancher knelt a few feet away, setting the lantern on the floor. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, his voice carrying the warmth of a man who'd spoken to more scared animals than people. "You're safe here. Just tell me what happened." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her hands shook as she tried to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, take them off." Jacob frowned. "Take what off?" She looked down, and only then did he see it, her ankles. Beneath the edge of the blanket, 2 rusty iron shackles bit into her skin. Dried blood caked around the wounds. His chest tightened, and for a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Jacob reached out, but she flinched away, curling into herself like a frightened child. "It's all right," he said softly. "You're not in danger anymore. I'll get those off." He ran to his workbench, grabbing a pair of heavy bolt cutters. When he came back, her tears had begun to fall. She whispered again, her voice breaking. "He said no one would ever take them off. That I belonged to him forever." Jacob's hands trembled. But he steadied himself. "Not anymore," he said, his voice like gravel and thunder. "Not while I'm here." With careful precision, he cut through the first shackle. The sound of snapping metal echoing through the barn like freedom itself. She gasped as the iron fell away, leaving her skin raw and bleeding. When the second shackle broke, she covered her face and wept, not from pain, but from the sheer shock of being unbound. Jacob pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You're safe now," he said again. Though part of him knew safety was a word that came too late for someone who had already seen hell. "Who did this to you?" he asked gently. She didn't answer at first. She just stared at the broken chains on the floor as if afraid they'd come alive again. Finally, she whispered, "My husband." The word cut through the silence like a blade. Jacob felt something in him ignite, that old, dangerous heat he thought he'd buried long ago. "He locked you up?" She nodded weakly. "He said I was his property. He said no one would ever believe me if I tried to leave. He'd keep me chained until I learned to be quiet." Jacob's fists clenched. He'd seen cruelty before. Men turning monsters under the weight of power and pride. But something about seeing it here, in his own barn, against a woman barely strong enough to stand, broke something inside him. "You're not going back," he said firmly. "Not now, not ever." She looked up at him, eyes searching for truth. "You don't know him," she whispered. "He'll come for me." Jacob met her gaze. "Then he'll have to go through me first." He made her a bed in the loft, gave her water and a bowl of soup. She ate slowly, every movement cautious. As if she expected him to change suddenly, to turn cruel like the men she escaped from. But Jacob only sat by the fire, eyes heavy with thought. When she finally fell asleep, he stared at the broken chains again. They were more than metal. They were a story, a wound carved deep into her soul. At dawn, the storm had passed. The land glistened under the new sun, clean and golden. Jacob stepped outside, breathing in the sharp air. When he saw tire tracks leading up to the road, fresh ones, his gut went cold. He hurried back inside, checked on the woman. She was still asleep. The faintest smile on her face, as if dreaming of peace for the first time in years. But peace was short-lived. The sound of a truck engine roared from the distance, growing louder by the second. Jacob's heart hammered. He walked to the porch, shotgun in hand. The truck came to a stop at the gate, dust swirling around it. A man stepped out, tall, mean-looking, with a scar running down his cheek and eyes that burned with ownership. "I'm looking for my wife," the man said. "She ran off last night." "You seen her?" Jacob said nothing at first, just studied him. "No one came this way," he lied smoothly. But the man's smirk told him he didn't buy it. "Funny," he said, glancing toward the barn. "That's a mighty fine place to hide something." He took a step forward. But Jacob blocked his path. "You're not welcome here." The man laughed, a cruel sound. "You think you can keep her from me? She's mine. Always will be." Something inside Jacob snapped. He took a step closer, his voice low and deadly. "You don't own her. You don't own anybody. You ever come near this place again, you'll wish you hadn't." The man's eyes darkened. "You don't know what you're getting into, old man." Jacob didn't blink. "Neither do you." The standoff stretched like a drawn wire until the man finally spat on the ground and turned back to his truck. "This ain't over," he growled. As the truck drove off, Jacob's knees nearly gave out. The rage, the fear, the protective instinct, it all came crashing down. He turned back toward the barn, where she stood in the doorway, pale and shaking. "He was here, wasn't he?" she asked. Jacob nodded. "But he's gone now. He won't touch you again." She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes filling again, but this time not with fear, but with something like gratitude. Over the next days, she began to heal. She told him her name, Evelyn, and bits of her story. How she'd been married off young. How the men had turned from charm to cruelty. How she'd endured years of silence until one night she broke free and ran barefoot into the storm, not knowing where she was going. Only that anywhere was better than the prison she'd been in. Jacob listened without interrupting. He didn't pity her, pity was hollow. He respected her strength, her survival. And slowly, she began to trust again. As the week went on, Evelyn helped around the ranch. Her movements growing steadier, her eyes a little brighter. She laughed once, a small, soft sound, and Jacob realized it was the most beautiful thing he'd heard in years. She began to look at him not as a savior, but as a man, someone who saw her not as broken, but as whole. One evening, as the sun set fire to the horizon, she stood beside him by the fence. "You never asked why I whispered that night," she said quietly. "Why I asked you to take them off." Jacob turned to her. "Didn't need to. You were trapped. That was reason enough." She looked at him. Tears glistening again, but softer this time. "It wasn't just the chains," she said. "It was the fear. I needed someone to take that off too." Jacob felt his throat tighten. He reached out, taking her hand gently. "Then we'll take it off together," he said. That night, under the wide Texas sky, two souls scarred by pain found a strange kind of peace. Jacob didn't know what the future would bring. But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid of it. And as Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder, the wind whispered through the plains, not a warning this time, but a blessing. The next morning, Jacob fixed the broken gate. But he left the chains lying in the barn, a reminder not of captivity, but of what it meant to be free.